Faizal, Khamisa joined by Hockey Central insider Chris Johnston. Chris, NHL teams getting set to return to play were given a document today, a large one. It's a protocol kind of governing training camps and return to play stipulations, and a lot of details in there as well. One big one includes the league's, autonomy to close things down and shut things down if things get out of hand. Let's start there before we delve into some other details. Chris, tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it's probably the first and most comprehensive view we've got into what might actually, derail this even after the point we're at today, if they go ahead with training camps or get into the game scenario. And really, there's two primary concerns here. Anything that gives the league reason to believe that players' health is jeopardized on a meaningful level. I think we're talking about if there's, say, a mini outbreak within a team or even multiple teams, that could do it. Or anything that threatens the integrity of the competition. And I guess that sort of goes part and parcel. I mean, to give you a hypothetical, if 6 players or 7 players on one team, when you got in the competition phase, all had to be isolated because they produced positive results. I mean, that's something, theoretically at least, that might take Gary Bettman and the league's medical people to say, look, we have to stop this. And so, this is part of what was spelled out over 100 pages of legalese here. And obviously no one wants to get to that point, but health and safety is going to be number one. And I think number two to this is making sure if you're going through the playoff format that it's done as fair as can be done under these circumstances.
So if a team does face that extreme hypothetical where 6 or 7 or even 3 or 4 players get impacted by this, what exactly does a team then get to do in order to kind of deal with this? Or are they just kind of stuck dealing with the consequences of having their players fall ill?
Yeah, there's not really too much, honestly. I mean, there's certainly some wording in this about, if the league decides to shut things down, if the Players Association doesn't agree with it, there's a process there. But I mean, really, I think when we come down to individual teams here, what their responsibility is making sure their players are following the rules. And there's very clear criteria here. If you produce a positive result, obviously you're self-isolating. How long you're on the sidelines too was clarified in here, which is a bit of a mystery. It depends. In the short answer is it depends if the player has symptoms or not. But at minimum, you have to produce 2 negative tests in a row before you can re-enter competition. So that'll be notable, of course, if someone's in the middle of the playoffs and does end up producing a positive test. I mean, it's going to be a couple days anyway, by the time you're able to produce those positive results. But, the teams don't have much say here other than just making sure the players follow what the protocols are.
So players and teams may not have control over what the league does if they were to fall ill, but they certainly have control as to how they act within the bubble. If, for example, a player was found to have left the bubble or multiple players were found to have left the bubble, what are some of the consequences, if any, Chris, outlined in this document?
Well, they will be severe and they will be on many levels. I mean, for the player themselves, if they leave without permission, if they were found to say, departing the hotel and going out for a night on the town, for example, I mean, automatic disqualification from the playoffs is part of it. Obviously that there's huge consequences that would come with that. And for the teams, the league does have the ability to either levy a large fine against a team and or deduct draft picks, which is, a pretty serious consequence. And so I think the way I read that is, of course, yes, players, you have to follow the rules here, but teams, you're also responsible for what the players under your care do. And we should note that there is an ability, for example, if a player has an excused absence, let's say his wife has a baby during this time, there is an ability to leave it at that period, and there's a self-isolation when you come back. But in terms of, once the competition starts, the games are being played, you're staying in the bubble hotel with your team. You have to really maintain that bubble because that's essential here to trying to keep everyone as safe as possible.
Now, Chris, we don't know if everybody will still be joining their teams. There is a date in that legalese that says Tuesday, 5 p.m. is when players who want to opt out have the opportunity to do so by. That's the deadline, although you feel as if that might change a little bit, right?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, look, we're talking here late Sunday night, and this document actually hasn't been voted upon yet, hasn't been ratified and approved. And so, there's a scenario here where I think that date gets pushed a little bit. But, one takeaway, to take from that is that players aren't going to have long, one way or another. I mean, if the voting process, the ratification process for the return to play starts early in the week, takes a couple days. I mean, you're looking certainly by the end of this week, when players are going to have to declare in writing to their teams that they're not going to participate this summer. Now, they've had a time to do so, and we should note here there's no penalty for opting out. But
I was going to ask,
that the next question, of course, for people, will anyone do this? Well, we're going to know here in pretty short order, assuming that this does get ratified as we would expect in the coming days. Players are going to have to make that declaration here pretty quickly.
And we have seen players opt out of the MLB season and the NBA season, notably when it comes to North American sports as well. It wouldn't surprise me if a player or two did so here as well. All right, there's a lot of serious detail in there, Chris, of course, but there's some fun things that you tweeted about as well. Each team will be responsible for having a social producer on hand to make sure the GIFs are out there and the memes are out there as well. I also found it interesting that players don't have to wear suits now. Hey, this is going to be interesting. Does that mean you maybe don't have to wear a suit when you start covering this again, or is that something we'll deal with later?
Well, I haven't talked to anyone, but my guess is I'm still suited up. But the players, and look, good on them. It's the summer.
Yeah.
It's not the normal circumstances. There's no dress code in effect. And we'll have those social media people on hand to show us what the nice threads the guys are wearing. But, there is some interesting things there. And even on the personal level, I mean, if you're in the bubble away from home and you've got a family back home, the team will take care of the groceries for you, for example, and the delivery, and help out with any medical issues. I mean, obviously, this is a pretty big commitment. Families are able to come meet up with players by the conference finals. But essentially, you're looking at, for teams that play 2 rounds of the playoffs, 5 to 6 weeks away from home in this bubble environment, which, as we mentioned earlier, it's not as though you can go leave and just take a walk because you want to see the city. I mean, it's going to be a pretty confined living space. And so, I think that some of these concessions or some of these changes to the day-to-day life of the players has been made just with the mental health aspects in mind. And, I did notice too that there's going to be some ability for them to leave in controlled ways. I think to say go to a golf course or some sort of planned excursion where the conditions are safe. And so, they're going to try to make this as manageable as possible for everyone. But, it's a tough situation. And as we see all these rules about the bubble life, I mean, it looks a lot different than what these guys are used to.
I feel like I should ask about testing in itself. It's not just the players who will be tested. I imagine it's obviously the coaching staff and the staff that are involved with the arenas and the hotels as well, that just to ensure that everybody's as safe as possible. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And, it starts in training camp. The players are tested every other day in camp, which is, more than they're being tested currently. And then once you get to the point where they're competing and they're playing games, players are tested every single day. That goes for coaches or anyone in direct contact with them. Even people like, say, the bartender in the hotel. I mean, people that are in that bubble environment on a meaningful level. Basically, there's classifications about how much you're coming in contact with the players. And if you're in that high contact group, I mean, you're being tested frequently because, the key here, of course, is that, there may be positive tests, but it's limiting the outbreak. It's identifying that as quickly as possible, doing the contact tracing and removing that person from being, in contact with people in the future. So frequent testing is essential to making the bubble work.
Chris, appreciate this. It's Sunday night, and appreciate your being able to parse through that quickly and give us all the details. Thank you.
Thank you, Faizal.